Thank you. I want to thank the St. George Spectrum and the Cedar City Daily News for giving us this opportunity. I want to thank Senator Hatch for attending. I appreciate his commitment to democracy and his commitment to the process. My name is Pete Ashdown. I was born and raised in Bountiful, Utah. And my background is I started a company in 1993 called X-Mission. I built that company on accountability. And when you go to the polls this November, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about one word: accountability. My opinion of this American Congress is they are not accountable to the American people. And I believe I can bring that accountability, and I'm demonstrating it in my campaign today. And I look forward to talking about the issues today, discussing the differences between myself and Senator Hatch. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the Spectrum and, of course, the Cedar City News. And I would like to thank Tuacahn, this wonderful high school. I took a tour of this high school earlier, and it's really terrific. And, of course, Bill Fowler, the wonderful principal here. I want to thank you students for being here, for all of you citizens who've taken time out to come and visit with us. It's been a privilege for me to work in the United States Senate and to work for you. We've worked on all kinds of things, but just to mention a few in St. George, your new airport, we just brought $17,200,000 to that. Of course, the 2005 flood assistance, I was the one who got the $66 million. Worked very, very hard with the whole delegation, but really pushed that through. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that has now reimbursed upwards of $1 billion to people who suffered from the low-level ionizing radiation. And, of course, the Divine Strike problem. We did not want that bunker buster bomb to be tested in areas where they had previous nuclear tests. But we're grateful to be with you, and I look forward to talking about my vision for the future.
Please briefly assess the situation in Iraq and tell us how you think the situation should be resolved.
Well, let's understand. What do we have, 3 minutes on this?
Yes.
Let's understand that 9/11 changed our lives forever because we were attacked in our mainland and 3,000 people gave their lives because of the terrorism that is in this world. This particular war is unlike any war that we've ever faced before. These people don't wear uniforms, they don't represent a country, and they want to kill civilians. And they want to kill people who differ with them in their beliefs. We've done a very good job in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has the first representative form of government in the history of Afghanistan. We now have a representative form of government in Iraq as well, something that people thought just couldn't have been done. 3 historic votes. The last one, 80% of the people voted. And I have to say, they risked their lives to do so, something that we don't have to do here where we have such low voting. We have either captured or killed a great number of the al-Qaeda leaders. We haven't yet got Osama bin Laden or Zawahiri, but we've got al-Zarqawi and a whole bunch of others, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. 14 of the 18 provinces in Iraq are in relatively good control. 4 of them we're having difficulties with. But let's just put it this way. Those 3 votes where people risked their lives established a constitution and a representative form of government that is now starting to take over, and people are starting to realize that the civil violence that's going on in that country is something they don't want to put up with. Saddam Hussein, we deposed him. He killed 300,000 of his fellow citizens and buried them in mass graves. Those are Shiites that he killed. He killed 180,000 Kurds in the north, and we have now put him out of business, and we have him on trial as well. Look, we have to win in Iraq. If we don't win in Iraq, we're going to have problems with terrorism the rest of our lives. Some have said we have to pull out of Iraq, and some have said we have to set a timetable. Well, if we do that, that's just like telling the terrorists, wait till the timetable is over, and then we can just start up again. General Abizaid said, if we leave Iraq prematurely, and we don't finish the job, the terrorists will follow after us right into this country. And I can tell you, as a member of the Select Committee on Intelligence, that that is literally true. Now, I want to praise the troops that are fighting for us over there from a number of countries, but especially our own, and especially those who came from down here in southern Utah, who have acted heroically over there, have made a difference, have fought and protected and helped people's lives. I know them, have met them before they went over in many cases, and have met them when they come home. We're lucky to have people like that representing us, and we need to fight against terrorism.
I believe the situation in Iraq is dire, and I believe that we are at the latest goalpost, which has been moved several times, which we're trying to establish democracy in Iraq. If we're trying to establish democracy in Iraq and we've had 3 successful elections, I think we should ask the Iraqi people what they think about the U.S. being in Iraq. The politicians in Washington don't know. I argue the people in the Pentagon don't know. The people that have to deal with this on a daily basis are the Iraqi people, and they should take the reins and be responsible for their future. Now, if they want us to stay, I think that quells a lot of the international controversy towards this mission, but there should be some cost associated with us staying. And if they want us to leave, we should respect that and leave. I agree that deposing Saddam Hussein was a good goal. I wish our other allies were on board when we did that, the French and the Germans. But I also ask the question, how did Saddam get to the stage that he was? Why was Saddam taken off of the list of terrorist countries in 1982? Why, after the UN condemned his use of chemical weapons, did we supply him with botulism and anthrax and the chemicals to make more chemical weapons? Why? Why did this happen? And I see it as a breakdown in our foreign policy that has been going on for decades. We need to have a smarter foreign policy. I believe in this country being strong, but I also believe in this country being smart in the way we deal with other countries, the way we deal with terrorism. And if we're going to win a military victory over there, I want people to stand up and realize what that cost will be. 62 million people died in World War II. 10 million Soviets died in World War II. 400,000 Americans died in World War II. Are we willing to do that to the Mideast? Are we willing to destroy that ideology? I don't know. I think we should have a debate about it, and I think war should be heavily debated. I think when we consider an action against any country, especially at the scale that we did in Iraq, that it should be robustly and heavily debated, and the intelligence that we get back should be questioned by the Senate Intelligence Committee, and not blocked and not postponed, but debated before we go in and take action. Thank you.
Utah prides itself in creating a good environment for children, but they are under attack more and more every day. What would you do to better protect our children from sexual predators?
For the past decade in my business, running the internet, I have given the tools to parents to protect their children. I have worked with the FBI on warranted searches to protect children. I've even given free accounts to those agents so they can protect children. I have always taken a hard line in protecting our most important resource, America's children. Now, I know Senator Hatch agrees with me that America's children should be protected. But the things we've seen in Washington as of late, I ask the question, why is this Congress so interested in monitoring the American people, even to the extent of violating the Bill of Rights, and they can't even monitor themselves? Now, give me an afternoon in the network closet of the Congress, and I could tell you what's going on. And I'm afraid it wouldn't be very pretty, because you look at what came out of the Department of the Interior this last week. The Department of the Interior had 50 full-time employees, the equivalent of 50 full-time employees, looking at sex, looking at gambling, looking at sports, looking at auction websites, all on our dime. Now, why can't they monitor that? Accountability. Again, accountability. I believe they should be accountable to us. Now, I don't monitor my employees, I'll admit that, but they're doing their job. If my employees were doing a job like being done in Washington, you can bet they'd be monitored. Falling down on immigration, falling down on health care, falling down on energy. You know, I believe in protecting America's children, and I have done so, and I think the laws that have been passed are great. I ask the question, you know, I'm not young, I'm old enough to remember I'm not too young to remember Ted Bundy, Dan Lafferty, John Wayne Gacy. What happened in the 70s, not only to Utah but to this nation. I hope there was some good legislation passed then, as well as good legislation being passed today. Thank you.
Much of what Mr. Ashdown has said I agree with. There is absolutely no excuse for anybody preying on children and taking advantage of children, or anybody else for that matter, but especially children. What happened with Congressman Foley is a terrible, terrible thing. He deserves all the condemnation that we can bring down on him. There's no excuse, and there's no excuse anybody can give for what he did. The fact of the matter is that I'm right in the middle of that battle all the time. I'm responsible for some of the most important legislation against child predation and against these people that are preying on our children, never passed by Congress. The PROTECT Act. The PROTECT Act established Amber Alert system. We in Utah understand that better than most, not just because of the SMART case, but especially because of the SMART case. That bill's now law. I might add that the sexual offender law that was just passed, the Adam Walsh bill, is a Hatch bill. Foley, by the way, was the chief sponsor in the House. I think Foley is likely to be the first person prosecuted under that bill, and I think that probably would be just desserts for him. The anti-child porn bill that I drafted is now part of that particular bill. In other words, we're going to stop people from using the Internet and using other forms of media to prey upon our children with pornography. And not just children, returned missionaries and a lot of other people whose lives are just ruined because they get into pornography. And then they start to ruin others' lives. And that's when they start to become sexual predators. And we've got to do it. But let me just mention one other bill that I think is very important. Back in 1994, Senator Biden and I passed the Violence Against Women Act. We are tired of the way women were being treated in our society. And so we passed a bill that brings down the wrath of the government and the wrath of law enforcement on those who commit violence against women. Because when people commit violence against women, it generally translates into violence against children as well. That bill is very important, and we just reauthorized that bill, and it's a very, very important bill for all of us. I want to make sure that we enforce all of those laws that we have passed. And if we do, we'll cut down considerably on this type of vile treatment of young people, of women, and others in our society. And as long as I'm there, you can count on me working in these areas and doing what's right.
Do you support the Washington County land bill that was proposed by Senator Robert Bennett and Representative Jim Matheson, and why?
I strongly favor that bill. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. It's something that needs to be done. Washington County and southern Utah have been found by the rest of the world. They've been discovered. And this is one of the fastest growing areas in the whole country. And we just have to have that bill, which basically has brought in virtually every interested party, every interested group. Talked to them, worked with them, try to come up with a way of solving our problems down here in Washington County. Washington County is one of the fastest growing counties in the country. And like I say, the world has discovered it. And we have to now do some very smart things to take care of the problems that exist in Washington County. Like I say, all parties have had an opportunity to participate and to raise their objections or their concerns, and I think they've been addressed. Do you realize only 16.1% of the land in Washington County is privately owned? If this bill passes, that will jump to 17.7%, 1.6% more. That's all it is. But it would be such an effective planning tool that it would help this land in this particular area to even become more well-managed, to be better for all of us and all of you. And let me just say this. It's good land use planning. One thing that's very important, we already have, without this bill, 53,000 acres of wilderness in Washington County. This bill, to show you how environmentally sound it is, will add another 219 million acres. Now, that's a total of wilderness land. That's a total of about 273,000 wilderness acres. So I think the environmental community has certainly been well treated by this bill, even though some have been fighting against it. Let me just say, this is an intelligent, common sense, decent, honorable way of solving the problems that exist here with regard to the control of land and with regard of land use planning, with regard to the quality of life in this area, so that we don't wind up with a helter-skelter approach that literally won't work. So you bet I support it, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help Senator Bennett and Congressman Matheson to get it through.
I do not support the land use bill for two reasons. Number one, I am not convinced that there has been adequate public input on this bill. A big part of my campaign is collaboration with the people. That's collaboration before the campaign, during the campaign, and after the campaign is won. And I don't feel that public input has been served in this land use bill. I've heard it from a number of people every time I come down here that they never got a chance to speak, that this was done under the cover of night in a couple of meetings with hand-picked individuals. Now, I believe this bill originated in Senator Bennett's office when it should have originated from the people of Washington County. And that's the first reason I don't believe in the land use bill. The second reason I don't believe in this land use bill is elected officials should not benefit financially from public policy. If they benefit from public policy, then something is severely wrong. I don't know what it takes for somebody to stand up and say, I've got a conflict of interest in Utah. You know, the only government role I've ever served on was with the Historic Landmarks Committee in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I excused myself because I had a customer walk in. What does it take for somebody to stand up and say, I have a financial interest in what is going on, I shouldn't be making the decision here? And that's the second point. I believe in judicious sale of lands, but when that happens, it should benefit everybody, not the few. And that's why I don't support the land use bill. Thank you.
What is the appropriate U.S. response to the North Korean nuclear weapons test?
That's an enormously tough one right now. And I'm not sure we have a lot of options. I believe our military is taxed, and we are unable to deal with that situation. And even if there was no Iraq, even if there was no Afghanistan, even if the military was back here in the United States, would we want to do a strike on North Korea with China sitting right next door? I've got friends in the military, and they tell me we don't have enough bullets to fight the Chinese. We would lose direly if the Chinese got involved. And I believe that's the key to this situation. China holds all the cards. They want stability as well. It's right on their border. They're going to have to deal with this. Now, the question we need to ask as Americans is, are we willing to accept an annexed North Korea into China, or are we willing to go in and deal with this mess on our own? Because I think that's where it's going to end up. The South Koreans have probably got to work with the Chinese as well, and I hope they do. But the North Koreans have stood up time after time after time, refused diplomacy, done the craziest stunts. And we talk about sanctions now. I heard Jon Stewart say the other night, how do you make sanctions against people who have nothing already? It's impossible. They can't starve them anymore. And it's not the people that are at fault here. It's the regime in charge. And I don't think we have the ability to do regime change in North Korea. And I don't think it would be wise to do that either. This is a problem for the Chinese to work out. I think that we do need a nuclear deterrent in the United States. I think it's important to have one for Iran, North Korea, or anybody else that's going to get the bomb down the road. They need to realize that we will not stand for a nuclear strike. But we need to hold that deterrent wisely. I think there is a lot to be done as far as reducing our arsenal. I worry about, more than anything else, an accident or nuclear weapons falling into the wrong hands, which could happen through North Korea, I admit it. But we need to keep a close eye on the situation and work with the Chinese to get it resolved. Thank you so much.
we should never underestimate the seriousness of this issue or the quality of people leading North Korea. We're talking about a very, very serious situation. This is a rogue nation. It's led by a madman. He's a smart madman, and he believes that he can blackmail the world into taking care of North Korea. I do not share the same confidence in China that my opponent does. As a matter of fact, it is important to note that virtually every nation in the world has condemned these so-called nuclear tests. And so far, they believe they are nuclear. This is a nuclear test. It's less than 1 kiloton, but it's still something very, very serious. By the way, those nations include Russia and China. Now, to go further, our nation has sent Chris Hill over there to negotiate and has continuously sent people there. But we are interested in 6-party nation talks. Those 6 nations are Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and the United States. Now, why do we push 6-party talks? Because we know that if we deal just bilaterally with North Korea, that they can lie to us as they always have. They lied during the Clinton years. They're lying during the Bush years. But because China and Russia and Japan and South Korea are also involved, it's going to be difficult for them to keep lying to all of them. China's very interested in what's happened here because China knows that unless North Korea can be stabilized, that those people are going to en masse come over to China. They don't want them. On the other hand, China, it is not in China's interest to allow North Korea to have nuclear weaponry. You know, when you think about it, you have a family dynasty here in Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il is nuts, but he's the last of that family dynasty. And when he goes, and we don't know when that will be, it could be soon, it could be later. When he goes, I think that's when we're going to truly be able to clean this mess up, because at that point, I think that they will exchange nuclear power for humanitarian assistance, which we're willing to give. As far as sanctions, we need to get sanctions, but sanctions work because that will stop all kinds of technology from going into North Korea. And it will also stop technology from coming out because North Korea is one of the leading proliferators of nuclear materials and nuclear intelligence in the world today. So we have to stand up to them, but we have to do it diplomatically first, and hopefully we'll never get to the other aspects of standing up to them. Thank you.
Millions of Americans and thousands of Utahns rely on Medicaid and Medicare for their health care needs. What must be done to keep these 2 programs viable, and what will you personally do to lead that effort?
Well, look, Utah is only 2.5 million people, a little bit more than that right now. California has 10 times the leadership people than we do, 10 times the members of Congress than we do. The fact of the matter is that if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, and I hope you'll all come and vote for me, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, then I will become chairman of the Finance Committee in a few short years. Now, that's the most powerful committee in the Senate. Some say the most powerful committee in the whole Congress, because the Finance Committee has jurisdiction over Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, the tax code, international trade. You go on and on. Almost every money issue is in the Finance Committee. Oddly enough, and I think important enough, this little state of Utah will have the chairman of the Banking Committee the same time I take over finance, and that's Bob Bennett, my partner. So we're on the verge of being able to do an awful lot of things that haven't been done in the areas of Medicaid and Medicare. Let me just say that I've worked very hard in the health care world. Starting early in my service in the Senate, enacted the orphan drug bill, where we only had 10 orphan drugs for population groups suffering of less than 200,000 people. Today we have over 1,000 in the pipeline, all because of that little orphan drug bill, or at least that's been a major impetus to it. The Hatch-Waxman Act, that created the modern generic drug industry. That has brought pharmaceutical costs down $10 billion by everybody's estimate a year since 1984, and maybe more than $10 billion today. I'd have to say the home health care bill was a bill that I passed early in my Senate service to bring home health care right into the home of people where they are most comfortable, where they are happiest, and where they get better care, rather than hospitalizing them or institutionalizing them at a much, much higher cost. The S-CHIP bill. This is the state child health insurance program. That bill was designed to help children of the working poor, the only kids left out of the health care system in our society. It's a $48 billion bill. I have to say that the cord blood bill is now providing, and that's a bill we just enacted this last year, that's providing relief for almost 72 different maladies. The Medicare Modernization Act played a major role in that. Look, we've accomplished a lot, but this is just the beginning. When I become chairman of that committee, I will have an ability to be able to do even more for Medicaid and Medicare. I've worked my way up on the Finance Committee. The future, we need health savings accounts where people can save for themselves. Their companies can donate to them, like X-Mission. I think they would do that. I believe in expanding the community health care system so that we can help the poor. It's a wonderful system. We've got to expand biomedical research where we use large molecule therapies to help individuals and individual therapies. And, of course, FDA revitalization is a Hatch bill done way back when, where we put a central campus where all of FDA is brought together so it can be more efficient and do a better job in providing the pharmaceuticals that we need in this country. Thank you.
If you look at the private cost of health care in America as a tax, like the rest of the world does, we are the most taxed people on this earth. I am intimate with the fact that health care insurance is failing us in America. I have tried to absorb the costs of all my employees' health care over the past decade. And when I first started hiring employees, I looked at dental plans, and I looked at health plans, and the dental plans at that time in 1995 were so atrocious that I said, forget it. I'm going to pay it out of pocket. I wish I had done that with health care, because I've paid over $1 million for 20-somethings and 30-somethings, and what I get back are rising premiums, lowered benefits, excuses, and pre-existing conditions. I believe in the free market, but this is not a free market. Now, Senator Hatch was the sponsor of the Citizens Health Care Working Group, a group that was put together of industry professionals, people concerned about health care, to try and come up with some solutions. And I agree with some of their assessments. They said it should be public policy that all Americans have affordable health care. Now, what I found very interesting is when they polled Americans, when asked to consider, among other options, whether to, quote, create a national health plan financed by taxpayers in which all Americans would get their health insurance, 78.3% strongly agreed or agreed. 17% disagreed. As a small business owner, I agree, because it is holding my business back, and I've talked to other people who are trying to start businesses, and they're afraid of losing their health care insurance. When Delta and GM point to health care insurance as the number one problem with the economy in America, we need people that are going to stand up and go against the political will and say, we need national health care insurance for all Americans. We need to cover our veterans from the cradle to the grave. We need to cover our children. We need to take care of the American people so they don't have to worry about this, and people should not be profiting off the health of the American people. I believe in that strongly, and I will fight for that when I go to Washington. Thank you.
As a high school student, why should I care what's going on? Why should I care about this campaign or about campaigns in general?
When I was a child, I was inspired by the space race. I remember one of the earliest memories I have is seeing the moon rock come back from Apollo 11. I remember in kindergarten, I used to run home from school every night to watch Apollo 17 on the evening news. And in 1976, there was a man in the airport who was a cohort of Senator Hatch's, Senator John Glenn. And that was the first autograph I ever collected. I believe in inspiring our children. I believe our children should be inspired by more than just celebrity and music and sports stars. I believe they should be inspired by engineers and scientists. And I believe this nation needs to get back to that. This nation needs to concentrate on America again. This nation needs to prioritize, not only in the state level, but on a federal level, our educational needs for all children in America. Because if we don't do it, the other nations are going to pass us by. We talked a little bit about China. I have a grave concern about our dependency on China. I have a grave concern that China is putting out 300,000 engineers on a yearly basis, where we're putting out about 60,000. We need to turn things around in this country, and I think that goes all the way from the top. We need to turn things around so we are inspiring our children again to do the great things, to do the hard things, as John F. Kennedy said. Why do we do the hard things? Because we're Americans, and we can tackle these problems. We can tackle the problem of energy. We can make clean, plentiful, cheap energy available to all Americans. I believe in conservation, but I also think that our economy would be supercharged like nothing else if we had clean, cheap, plentiful energy available to everyone. I believe in good transportation, good infrastructure. I was a big proponent of the Utopia project here in Utah. I still am. I have a large financial resource committed to that project, probably more than what I spent on this campaign. And I believe in it. I believe in bringing rural Utopia fiber access internet to all Americans. I believe in high-speed rail. You know, I think what we're doing in Salt Lake County is great with the UTA. Salt Lake County to Weber County to Utah County at 75 miles per hour. But we need high-speed rail from Tremonton to St. George at 300 miles per hour. Why? Because the rest of the world has it, and we need to compete internationally. That is why you should vote for me in November. Thank you.
Well, I know some of you young people would probably wish you were in your classes taking tests today rather than going through this. But to make a long story short, we have the greatest generation of young people in the history of the world, right here in this country. We also have the worst generation, because we have a number of kids on drugs, in child pornography, into a whole bunch of other things that our society is letting them down on. Now, our young people in this school, this is a perfect example of how great young people can be, the future that they have. I was just thinking about, Mr. Ashdown was talking, and I agree with much of what he said. Keep in mind, all these things cost money. I don't want you to have a government that dominates every aspect of your lives, which some do. Quite a few back there in Washington. I want you to have every opportunity you can. Pete's right. We only educate about 60,000 engineers in this country, and half of those are foreigners. China's educating 300,000, and many of them are being educated by people who learned right here at the University of Utah and other engineering schools in the country. But we're living in the most wonderful time of all, where the greatest light and knowledge has come forth, where we have the science and math to really do things that have never been done before. We also have the compassionate instincts, especially in Utah, of helping people in ways that they've never been helped. In the energy bill alone, one of the reasons why it's important that I serve on that finance committee, among others, I haven't mentioned the intelligence committee or the judiciary committee or the help committee that I serve on, is because that committee covers just about everything that involves money. And frankly, I get put on all kinds of conference committees because of the experience I have back there. Having been put on the Highway Conference Committee, we brought $1.8 billion to Utah, the most money ever brought, that does some of the things that Mr. Ashdown's talking about that would never be done if I didn't have the experience and the time there, and if I wasn't on that committee and the high-level position I'm in. On the energy bill, I put five hatch bills in that bill. The incentives for developing tar sands and oil shale, we have 1 trillion barrels that can be recovered at a cost of about $34 a barrel. And if oil stays up $60 or more, that's very important. Better permitting language. Geothermal incentives. We can produce electricity for upwards of 66 million people just out of Utah geothermal. Building of oil refineries. We've lost 250 in the last 4 years. We've only built one. And, last but not least, the CLEAR Act. The CLEAR Act gave incentives to develop alternative fuels, alternative fuel vehicles, alternative fuel infrastructure. You talk about engineering, you talk about the future, you talk about CO2 emissions, you talk about global warming. I'm already there, doing things that haven't been done before. And the reason I can is because I'm in a position to do it. And I had to work my way up every step of the way to get that position. That's why I want you to vote for me, because I can do a lot more, not just for Utah, but for our country.
One of the most frequent questions I get when I'm out on the road, and I've spent about 20,000 miles touring this beautiful state, is why in the world are you running? And I wanted to show you one of the reasons why I'm running. I don't know how many of you can see this. This is my daughter, my youngest daughter. I have 3 kids. Today's her first birthday. And I'm here to give her what I think would be the best birthday present ever, is a better America. I'm in a position to stand and do something good for this country. And a lot of people aren't. When I first started talking about this race with my employees, one of them said, run for all the people who want to, but can't. And run against all the people who do, but shouldn't. And that's why I'm doing this. Not only to give a better future to my daughter Greta and my son Henry and my daughter Madeline, but to give a better future to all Americans. We desperately need vision, not only in the Congress, but especially in the Democratic Party. And I think this race presents a unique opportunity for Utah to lead the Democratic Party. I have not gotten one whit of assistance from those national Democrats. And I believe that's because they are short-sighted and concentrated on swing states and politics as usual. I've been out crafting a campaign which has come from Utah and the American people. And I'm committed to those ideals, the ideals of working with the American people, of accountability in Washington, and protecting our beloved Constitution. Now, Senator Hatch has done some great things. I honor him for the things he has done. He talked a little bit recently about his hybrid bill, and I think that's a good example. Hybrid electric cars are not a new thing. GM had a hybrid electric car in the 70s, and why wasn't our Congress supporting that action in the first gas crunch? If they had done that, a lot of the problems we face today, we wouldn't have to face today. We wouldn't have these dictatorships propped up by oil. We need people with vision in Washington that are looking towards the next 30 years rather than trying to grapple with the last 30 years. And I have a track record of doing that, and I've done it in my business, and I will do it in Washington. And when Utahns wake up on November 8th and I've won this election, all eyes in this country are going to turn to Utah, and that will be a great day for all of us. Thank you so much.
Senator Hatch.
Well, I want to congratulate Mr. Ashdown for running. It takes guts to do it. I respect him for it, and I think that he deserves commendation for it, and you've shown some here today. But it's more than that. I personally believe Mr. Ashdown ought to continue to do what he's doing and stay right where he is at X Mission, where he can help people to get jobs and do some of the things that he believes are so important. If he goes back there, he's going to start right from scratch. And to be honest with you, I don't start from scratch. I did a long time ago. But I agree with Mr. Ashdown. The reason that I've been a senator and the reason that I've fought so hard to serve you is because Elena and I have 6 children. We have 22 grandchildren. She left yesterday for California to help to be there with our youngest daughter, who will make the 23rd grandchild. And I'm very proud to tell you we have a great-grandchild that was just recently born. Every one of those kids means the world to me, as do yours. That's why I fight so hard to try and resolve these conflicts. I used to be a Democrat. I used to be a liberal Democrat when I attended BYU, of all places. I just started to look at it, though, and I couldn't stand the fact that they think the federal government is the last answer to everything in our lives, that the federal government can decide things better than we can, that the federal government should basically dictate from Washington every aspect of our lives, that the federal government has to take over all health care and run the costs up so high that we can't even afford them, that the federal government really should take money from the military because we have so many people with difficulties that we're already helping, that the federal government has an unending supply of money, or that we should allow illegal aliens amnesty. Think about it. Those ideas are not primarily Republican ideas. The fact of the matter is that we have 6 immigration agents down here because I'm one of the top people on the Judiciary Committee. We have the first field office director. We used to have to be directed from San Francisco, of all places, with regard to immigration now. The FOD office just got it. We now have an immigration court. We used to have to take our cases to Denver, Colorado, where now we have our own judge and our own court. And I believe that we ought to take care of the border first before we get involved in trying to give amnesty to another 11 or 12 million people, some of whom are good, honest, many of whom are good, honest, decent people, but ought to obey our laws. In other words, let's just be frank about it. We're a nation of immigrants, and we ought to always remember that. But we're a nation of laws. And let me tell you, if you want to solve these problems, you've got to have somebody back there who literally has the ability to do it, the position to do it, the guts to do it, and the energy to do it. I have never felt better. I have never been more enthusiastic about serving you again. I have never wanted to serve more than I do right now, not because I want to hold on to this job, but because I know I can do things that have to be done, and I know I can do things that you want done. And I don't believe the federal government holds the last answer to everything. The fact of the matter is, I know it doesn't because I've been there. I've done that, and I can do it even better. So I'm asking all of you to vote for me, and I will continue to be the best senator that you could possibly have in every way I know how to be.